Hi everyone, welcome to the Whiteleyverse with me, Connor Whiteley, for another daily short story. Now, before I start today's story, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithm. Also, if you want to buy this short story and any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers and at your local bookstore and local library if you requested, and you can order paperback copies from Amazon. Now, here's today's short story. I hope you enjoyed just as much as I did writing it.
Loving the family recipe. As much as I, Alex Hill, really did love seeing, talking to, and spending time with my neighbor Ruby Jones, even I had to admit I really didn't want to get involved in this family recipe business. She had managed to corner me in the lift that led from the wonderfully warm, Christmassy, joyful reception area to our apartment building. I still didn't understand how the building owner had managed to cover every single little surface in red, blue, and green tinsel and somehow make it work, but he managed it. Now, as the lift rose up, which was a little dirtier than usual, and someone had decided to draw a massive cock on the cold gray sides of the lift. It had to be one of the teenagers that lived in the building, but I certainly didn't mind looking at it. The attention to detail was stunning. And it meant I didn't have to listen to Ruby too much. "Come on, Alex," she said. I looked at her and made sure my expression was plain, because Ruby was a good-looking woman. She was young, smiling, and her teeth were pearly white. And yes, as you can tell, I don't normally judge women on their appearance, but Ruby was a great woman. Granted, I didn't like her fashion choice of a thick black coat, black leggings, and a black t-shirt. She looked a little gothic today, which wasn't like her at all. Yet it was her large bags of garlic, peppers, and tomatoes that made the lift smell great. "Please," Ruby said like a small child would to a parent. I just grinned at her, because Ruby was a typical middle child, in a sense, because I had moved into the building about 3 years after I finished my business degree at University College London. And now I worked as a restaurant manager at a number of small chains all across London. Sometimes I felt more like a babysitter than a manager, and Ruby had always had the same problems. She always wanted to be the best. She always wanted to impress her impossible family, and most importantly, she had always wanted a husband, but she couldn't get one. Everyone in the building had a different theory about that. My other neighbor, Mrs. Bruce, said that Ruby wasn't a real woman, but that's just her being sexist and ageist because she's that old. So I try to avoid her when I can. The doorman, who is a massive player, said that Ruby had her standards too high, but he is probably only saying that because she had rejected him like every other woman in the building. Hell, I've dated all sorts of men at university, but I would never ever touch or kiss or think of hugging our doorman. He is awful. Anyway, my theory about why she couldn't get a husband is simply because she doesn't really want one. She's probably aromantic or asexual or something, because she just doesn't have the drive or interest to date. And that's okay, and that's perfectly fine. I just wish her family could see that Ruby was perfectly happy being single with her friends and family around her. Except she wasn't happy right now. "What exactly do you need me for?" I asked. And no, I wasn't listening. "I will never understand how you can be so obsessed with cock," Ruby said. I gave her a mocking nod and focused back on the cock in the lift. "You know, my grandmother passed away 3 months ago. Well, this Christmas is our first one without her, and we have a problem. Grandma always made these little pastries that the whole family loves. Problem is, she never passed down the family recipe. And let me guess," I said sadly, looking away from the cock, "you and your 3 sisters and 2 brothers are in competition to create them. Whoever is closest to the original recipe wins, and even better, you do not want to lose. You know that much about my family? You talk a lot, and I still thankfully get to see you," I said, smiling, so I sounded a little less harsh. "Please help me," Ruby said. "I need this honor, and I promise there is something exciting for you waiting in my apartment." Now, a normal gay man might want to spend their Friday nights at a gay bar, a gay club, or just sitting at home alone enjoying the freedom that came with being single. But oh no, I decided to spend my Friday night with my neighbor so she could win a family honor that had absolutely no impact on my life. That's the sort of nice guy the first was. Little did I realize this was actually about to have a massive impact on my life, possibly changing it forever. I think I sort of deserve extra points here for not even going to my own apartment to get changed out of my work clothes or anything first. I was still in my chef whites, and I had spent today in the kitchen helping the new chef because the sous chef was sick, more like couldn't be asked to come in, so I followed Ruby straight into her apartment. That's the sort of good friend I was. I was almost embarrassed at the condition of my own apartment as I went into Ruby's. They had exactly the same layout, with it all being completely open plan. Ruby had a wonderfully large living room with a blue sofa, a walnut coffee table, and a very nice gray armchair. Then I was glad to see she had her family's landscapes hanging on the light blue walls of the apartment. I had always loved those landscapes of the countryside, the poppy fields, and so many other great places. I had always wanted to meet Ruby's grandma because she was the artist. But sadly, that never happened. I saw Ruby getting down 3 wine glasses and I rolled my eyes. She was setting me up with someone I knew it. There probably wasn't even a family recipe to fight out. Anyway, I went across the large apartment, the icy coldness of the floor making me very glad I had socks on, and then I pulled back a bright red stool, so not my color, from her granite kitchen island. The kitchen was definitely a lot better than mine, and I was the so-called chef in the building. My kitchen was small, cramped, and I never really had much food in the house. It was cheaper that way, and I got to have some free French food at work, so I was perfectly happy. But the delightful aroma of creamy hazelnut latte with a splash of vanilla that filled the apartment really made me smile, as Ruby sprayed some of her new perfume. "So what do you need?" I asked, knowing sooner or later this date or setup was going to happen. Ruby smiled, and she went to the built-in fridge and got out 3 small pastries. I didn't know what they were, but I could tell they were made with the flakiest full pastry I had ever seen. The pastry was golden brown, so clearly egg wash had been used, but the pastry looked slightly different. Maybe it was made with a different flour, because it didn't look like white pastry for starters. "Have you finished your outside inspection?" Ruby asked like I was crazy. I probably had a strange look on my face, but that was mainly because I spent all day studying, thinking and planning menus and managing chains. It was an impossible habit to turn off. "Yes, sorry," I said. There was a knock on the door. Ruby leapt up in excitement, and I just rolled my eyes. I still spun myself on the bar stool, and I really hoped whoever this setup was going to be good and worth my time. Ruby didn't have the first clue about choosing men, so this was going to be interesting. "Hi, Stephen," Ruby said. My heart pounded in my chest. My mouth went as dry as a desert. My hands were all slippery. My mind went blank for a moment. Oh my God, Stephen. That was Ruby's intensely attractive and sensational brother. He was literally a Greek fucking god amongst men, and he was so perfect and just wow. Just wow. I tried to make myself look presentable, as I heard Ruby and him come into the apartment. I fell off my stool and landed face down on the floor. "Alex, are you okay?" Ruby asked, rushing over to me. I felt 2 very strong, manly hands grab my shoulders and pull me up. My wayward parts stood up like the pastry chefs when the chef barked an order. Thank God I still had my apron on. I just grinned like an idiot as Stephen finished placing me back on the stool like I was a precious parcel or something. I flat out loved how hot and attractive and pretty Stephen looked, with insanely his thin and hot gym body. His wide board shoulders were incredible to look at, and as his fit waist highlighted how toned and wonderful he was. His slightly pointed face was grinning at me too. His light blue eyes were so calming to look into that I didn't want to look away, not even for a moment. This was the best moment of my life, and I seriously didn't mind Ruby for setting us up, even though I didn't think Steven was into men in the slightest. "Hi," I said, hating myself for how high-pitched it came out. "Hi to you too," Steven said, taking a stool and sitting next to me. "You too," Ruby said, clicking her fingers. "We need to solve this pastry problem." I looked at Steven. "How comes you aren't fighting for the family honor then? Unless there isn't a family honor at all, and Ruby is just making stuff up to get me here." "No," Ruby said, like I had called her every swear word under the sun. "These pastries are the last piece of my grandma. We have to find out her secrets, and we have to make sure her food lives on. All whilst making sure you're the only one that does it," Steven said, "and can boast about how great you are." I liked how silent Ruby went as she sliced down one of the pastries for me to inspect. There was a loud crack and flake of the pastry, so that confirmed that it was full puff expertly done. I was surprised any home cook outside a professional kitchen could achieve such flake. Then Ruby pulled the knife out and broke open the pastry for me to see. I nodded as I could see I had been right earlier. This pasty wasn't made with white wheat flour, it looked more like cricket flour or something. I knew bug flour was becoming more and more popular because it was great and was very eco-friendly, but I had never tried to make full puff from that flour before. That could be a game changer. Hints of garlic, tomatoes, and maybe lamb mince filled the kitchen as the pastry's filling caught my attention. Almost as much as the hot, pretty man sitting next to me. All I wanted to do was run my hand up and down Steven's muscular back and stomach and biceps. I really wanted to focus on him, but Ruby had asked for my help, so I had to help her. "What do you think?" Steven asked. I always shivered in pleasure at the sound of his delightful voice. It was so smooth, so sexy, and so manly. "I need a taste test to be sure," I said. Ruby shook her head. I just looked at Steven and admired his full lips as Ruby went to the fridge again, and I presumed got out her own version of the pastries. "What do you think?" Ruby asked. I didn't need to look away from attractive Steven to see how awful they looked. I knew her cooking, and I could see it all in Steven's eyes. But I wanted to be polite, so I looked at them anyway. "Not bad," I said, meaning it. The flake wasn't as good as her grandma's, but the flake was good for an amateur baker. There wasn't as loud a crack as Ruby sliced into the pastry. Yet the filling looked slightly less vivid in its red color. The pastry in Ruby's version was made with white wheat flour, and I just knew they were going to taste differently. "You look really good when you concentrate," Steven said. "Your eyes are so focused, and there's a little vein in your right eyebrow that pokes out." I grinned like a little schoolboy. It was great to know he was focusing on me as much as I was him. "Gay boys focus, focus, focus," Ruby said. I picked up each of the pastries and took a small nibble off each one. Grandma's version was rich, juicy, and there were so many tones and layers to the flavor that I was seriously impressed. I was getting so many hints of different types of garlic, cheeses, and herbs. Even the mince had to be prepared and boiled for a long time to be this good. I knew I had tasted it before, but I just couldn't place it. Then I tried Ruby's and forced it down. It felt like swallowing glass, and Steven placed a sensationally warm hand on my right leg. How the hell I didn't come at the moment, I don't know. He was so damn hot. "So?" Ruby asked. "What do you think?" "I don't believe she cooked this," I said, not realizing I was going to say that until the words just slipped out. "What?" Ruby asked. "What the hell do you mean she didn't cook these?" I looked at sexy Steven, and I so badly wanted to take him over to the sofa and sit so close to him that I could feel his body warmth against mine. Sadly, we couldn't do that just yet. "What do you mean?" Steven asked like I had a real point, and I was an important person that had to be listened to. "The slight nutty tang of the pastry that comes from cricket flour. That puff pastry is professional level, and that is hard to do. I don't know anyone who is using bug flour in puff pastry. And there are too many flavor profiles in that filling for an amateur to do," I said. Steven nodded like I was absolutely correct. She had to be the cook. She said so, Ruby said like an angry child. She never lied. You're a French chef, so you have to be wrong. I laughed, and then I clicked my fingers. I knew exactly where I had tasted that filling before. About a year after I met Ruby, I had been talking to her mom on the way to work, and she had mentioned this great little town in northern France. So I went there 3 months later, and I brought the little pastries her mom recommended. As much as I didn't want to stop looking at Stephen because he was damn attractive, I got out my phone, Googled the French bakery in northern France, and I just laughed. Your grandma didn't make these pastries. She brought them every year without fail, I said. Stephen took my phone and laughed. I went to get my phone back, but Stephen grabbed my hand. And I gasped at how smooth, silky, and warm his hand was. I loved feeling him, and I could tell he was enjoying it too, as he subtly rubbed my hand. I'm ordering some, Stephen said. We might as well keep Grandma's tradition alive. I laughed. Are you really going to keep buying them and claiming them as your own? Clever Grandma, Ruby said, grinning. That was just typical of her. Yeah, that's my plan. Me too, Stephen said as we all stood up and went over to the sofa and armchair. I was about to sit down when Stephen gently grabbed me and pulled me close so we could sit next to each other. I flat out loved feeling his hard body against mine, and the feeling of his body warmth was sensational. I so never wanted this moment to end. So, I said, are you free tonight? I was thinking we could go over to my apartment. And do what? Stephen asked seductively. Talk, cook, get to know each other a little better, I said, grinning because I had met Stephen enough times to know how lovely, caring, and compassionate he was. He was a nurse trainee and he was always the happiest person in a room. He was always the most cheerful, and if someone ever needed him, he was always there. Just like how he was always there for Ruby and trying to give her the validation the rest of her family never gave her. I would love that, Stephen said, taking my hand in his, and I shivered in pleasure at his touch. As me and Stephen left Ruby, we both laughed as we heard her shout out in joy that we were going on a date. And I couldn't blame her. Stephen was a perfect, fit, sexy man who was caring and everything I really wanted in a man. This might be a first date, but I had a feeling it certainly wasn't going to be the last, and I couldn't help but smile at that. That really was the perfect ending to a perfect Friday evening.
Welcome back everyone, it's me again, Connor Whiteley. So I really hope that you enjoyed today's story, because I flat out love writing, creating stories and sharing them with you. If you really enjoyed today's story, then please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content, and the engagement really helps the Whiteleyverse with the YouTube algorithms. And if you want to buy this short story or any of my other fiction, then they're available from all major ebook retailers, and you can get them from your local library if you requested, and you can order the paperback copies from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you request it. Lastly, if you want to support the channel on a one-off basis, then you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Whiteley. Also, if you know anyone who would enjoy today's story, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help us spread the word about the channel. So, thanks for watching the Whiteleyverse, and I'll see you again soon. Have a great day, everyone.